Good evening, everybody. My name is Inga Cotton. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms. Tonight, it's a special edition of Charter Mom Chats. It's the private school edition, and we have a panel of experts from some of the best private schools around San Antonio. So let me start by introducing our guests. So from Fusion Academy, we have Lynique Charles, and she's the head of school at Fusion Academy San Antonio. And then from Winston School San Antonio, we have Kristin Ashley, and she's the Dean of Studies at the Winston School. And then in the bottom corner is Andrea Banks, and she's at the Keystone School, and her specialty is enrollment services. So thank you, Lynique, Kristin, and Andrea for joining me. And we have a whole bunch of questions queued up that we want to share about private schools. We're also hoping that the audience will also share about, or also ask questions about private schools so that we can make this as helpful as possible. So, and then I just want to make a note, we're going to gather this group again on November 2nd for another private school panel. And we hope that we get a new set of questions and have more interesting things to share. So, okay, so now that I've introduced our panel, and let me give each of them a chance to talk about like what is unique about their school and what role they have at their school. So I'm going to send it over to Lynique first.
Thank you, Inga. I feel so lucky to get to work for Fusion Academy. What is so unique about Fusion is that we're fully accredited private 6th through 12th grade school, but we teach our students in a 1-to-1 ratio. So one student, one teacher in each classroom, and our instructors have the ability to really customize and individualize our students' learning so that they kind of relearn how they learn. Our goal is not that they get used to being in a one-on-one space, but that they're taking in and absorbing how they learn best so that when they move on, no matter what the teacher, subject, or difficulty level is of instruction, they are able to soar. So that's what we do with Fusion. Thank you, Inga.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Let me give Kristin a chance to talk about Winston School.
Hi, everyone. I'm the Dean of Studies at the Winston School, San Antonio. So Winston is a K-12 college preparatory private school for kids with high potential and identified learning disabilities. So we specialize in kids with ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia. The list goes on, but we have about 200 students, K through 12. We just focus on providing that individualized instruction.
Thank you, Kristin. Okay, so Andrea, I'm going to put you on the big screen so you can talk about what you do at the Keystone School.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrea Banks. I'm the Director of Enrollment Management at Keystone School. Keystone School is a pre-K through 12 school in the heart of San Antonio, about 10 minutes from downtown. We are the top academic school in San Antonio. We were just rated #1 on niche for #1 private high school in San Antonio, even though we're pre-K-12. We offer an accelerated curriculum, challenging academics, but also an environment that's kind and nurturing and very diverse. So I like to say, if you have a front row kid, that Keystone is the school for them.
That's awesome. Thank you for each of you for explaining about what's unique about your school. So so I have some questions queued up that I especially want to ask y'all, and then hopefully we get some comments and some feedback from the audience. So, the first question I want to ask is for Lynique at Fusion. So you mentioned that Fusion Academy offers one-on-one education. So I was wondering if you could talk more about what that looks like.
Yeah, sure. So we typically serve 4 different types of students at Fusion. We have those students who are ready to accelerate in the traditional classroom. Maybe it's moving a little too slow for them and they are ready to take it up a notch. That's student number 1. Student number 2 is maybe a student that has some significant skill gaps and we need to maybe slow down their pacing to fill that in and help them get those foundational skills. Student number 3, These I call the superstars. So these students may be professional actors, athletes. They need a different sort of schedule. The Monday through Friday, 8 to 3, just won't cut it for them. And then we also get a fourth group who maybe just don't fit in those big, large school settings. They need something more intimate. With Fusion being a micro school, we're able to serve them on a much smaller scale since we only serve up to 100 students per school year. So Inga, you heard how different all 4 of those kiddos are. That means that we need to do something different for all 4. And in a one-on-one space, we can do that. Our teachers are able to pace our kiddos as quickly or as slowly as needed. The flexible scheduling is really helpful for some families as well. And then, I mean, just to see students start to grow in a small capacity, maybe students who never had a voice in the large settings, you see them start to become, I don't know, really empowered. And so in, again, that one-on-one space, they just have the opportunity to be seen and heard in the way that best supports that kiddo.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. And the way you described, like, you know, how unique those students' needs are, I can understand why you can't put all those kids into the same classroom and just expect that learning model to work for all those kids. Okay, so I want to ask right off the bat, let's see, my question about Winston, I wanted to kind of follow up, like you described, like, you know, different types of students that you serve who maybe learn differently. And I'm wondering, what does Winston do to meet the needs of those students who have these different diagnoses and learn differently?
Yeah, so first and foremost, our priority is understanding how the student learns. So we look at the student's complete academic and cognitive profile. We just working with the students, learning a lot about the student's background. We make sure before they even step inside the door that we understand how they will learn best. And then with the way our classes are set up, students are grouped based on their strengths and their needs. So we're able to accelerate students based on their strengths and then mediate those needs in a small group setting. Because we're a private school, a diagnosis doesn't mean that you get services, or services are not, or accommodations are not exclusive to students who have a diagnosis in something. Accommodations are provided freely for students, given that that's how that they will learn best. So some of that includes the master notebook, daily or check-ins with their advisor throughout the day. The small group setting, just kind of those different things are provided freely, and it's not dependent on them having a 504 plan or the ARD documentation or anything. And then we also really focus, because we're on a small ratio, we average about 10 to 1 in a class. We can provide that really targeted instruction to, again, accelerate student strengths and mediate any difficulties that they have.
Yeah, well, Kristin, that's really helpful. That adds more detail to the picture. And I think what like, you know, speaking as the parent of a special needs child, and you know, I know, you know, and many families join the Facebook group because, you know, their child's needs aren't being met at their particular school. And so I think what you're talking about is, well, partly it dispels there's a myth that charter schools or that private schools simply don't serve kids with special needs. And the same myth can apply to charter schools as well. So it's really, the answer is it depends, right? It's really more complicated. And anyway, we can get into this more, but I feel like that was a really helpful introduction. And that's like, sometimes the struggle, if you have a child with special needs, is dealing with like the categories, the paperwork, the bureaucracy, right? And then when you can bring together, like, you know, teachers who love kids and kids who want to learn, and you can break away from some of the rigidity, then it opens up new possibilities. So
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay. So Andrea, I want to ask you a follow-up question about Keystone School. And sorry, it's kind of a long question, but I have to make it long to bring in all these elements, because that's what's so unique about Keystone, is that y'all bring together an accelerated curriculum and challenging academics, but there's also the social emotional learning support. So how does Keystone bring all those elements together?
Right. First and foremost, Keystone it's an environment for students who love learning, who think outside the box, who love to ask questions. It's the kind of school where um, when it's time for recess, we'll have a couple of students saying, okay, just a couple more minutes because we want to finish this cool problem that we're working on. But balancing that with that, our students, particularly the younger students, are still young and we still want them to experience their childhood. We still want them to be young. And so at Keystone School, because it is very accelerated, we do have a high level of expectation, but it also comes with a high level of support and care. And so what they're doing throughout the day is mentally taxing. I'll admit there's a lot of work that's required on their end, but then they get, especially for the younger students in elementary, they get 30 minutes of PE every day. Our kindergartners get 45 minutes of recess. So for kindergarten through fourth grade, primarily, you're getting at least an hour of that physical activity. We even build in physical movement and brain breaks in the classroom. And so when people think of an accelerated, rigorous program, they think of students not being engaged, not asking questions, a lot of rote memorization, no time for them to be silly, no time for them to get the wiggles out to play or run around, And that's just not the case at Keystone School. We really do a very good job of finding that balance where our students are challenged and they're engaged, but they can also be adolescents. They can also be middle school students where they make mistakes. They can feel free to make those mistakes. And I think that when people think of Keystone, they think it's a grind, they think it's really hard. But our students make mistakes just like everyone else, and we encourage them to learn and grow from that.
Thank you. That's really helpful. It's hard to summarize, or it's hard to say in a short amount because there's so much going on at Keystone. But I think you explained well, like that it's a balance, and like helping them still be kids, but also being responsive to their curiosity, and that they want to stay busy and they want to learn all this new stuff. So, okay, well, great. Well, I feel like private schools are in the spotlight, that like this in this time of year, right? So like in the group, I'm always talking about like open enrollment, and that charter schools are starting to have their open enrollment, but I know private schools are also starting to have, like, y'all offer tours, and starting to get families thinking ahead about the next school year. So that's why I'm really glad we can talk about like what's unique about each of y'all schools, but also maybe like dispel some of the myths about private schools, to encourage families to look broadly at what their education options are, right? Like they can look at their neighborhood public school, they can look at open enrollment charter schools, and they can look at private schools. So one of the questions that comes up, and this is like, even like as an organization, we struggle with, like, how do we cover private schools, because it's so broad, and it's everything from like a co-op or a small homeschool group, right? That's almost like a private school at one end, and then there's like the Archdiocese of San Antonio, right? That's been around for like decades, and has very well established schools. So I guess if parents have questions about, like, is a private school legit, like so maybe Lynique, maybe you could comment on this, like how does a family know if a private school is legit or not?
Sure. I think they have to be fully accredited. The kids are working so hard, and we're going to need those credits to count as they apply for colleges. So you want to make sure that your school is accredited under TEA. But also another piece too, every school is different. There is no one size fits all. And so you want to make sure that it's legitimate to your family as well. Like, does it feel like a good fit for your kid? And that does require coming to visit each of us. And who knows, you may have 3 different children and they each go to school with myself, Andrea, and Kristin. So making sure you find what's right for the family, but then also making sure your school is fully accredited.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point, Lynique. So parents can look at which organizations have accredited the school, and that's a sign that it's legit. But then also to visit and ask questions, and then try to decide, is this school the right learning model for my kid? So, Yeah. So, okay. So another question that comes up a lot with private schools is affordability. Like, what is the, because, right, like charter schools are free, neighborhood public schools are free. Private schools do charge tuition because they're not receiving money from the state of Texas. But there are ways to make private school more affordable. So, I don't know. So, Andrea, what are some of the sort of questions or kind of myths that you hear when parents come and visit Keystone?
Well, Keystone is very blessed in that we have a lot of socioeconomic diversity, and I think it's different from our other schools in the area. And so we offer tuition assistance. We don't offer merit-based scholarships. If we did, then every student in the school would receive a scholarship. So we offer tuition assistance based on demonstrated financial need. I feel like with private schools, there's no way around it. It's an investment. You're investing in your child. You're investing in their education long term, right? And so for any of us that feel strongly about something adding value to our lives, we do invest in it. I think, Inga, a myth is that people, when they're looking at a private school, off the bat they think, I can't afford it, so I'm not even going to bring up that conversation about affordability, or if it can work for me. So when I have conversations with parents, I say, if you're even thinking about affordability, if you're even thinking or questioning if I can afford this, that's a great conversation to have. Because at Keystone, I always say, if it's a family that fits our mission, if it's a student who we really feel belongs here, where they would benefit greatly from the education, we will always make it work. We absolutely will. We believe strongly in, as parents are investing in their children's education, we're also investing in that family. And so we want to make sure that our tuition is never a burden to any family. And I always say that we can meet them. We can meet them halfway. Also, another myth is that tuition assistance only goes to those families who need so much of it. But I always tell families it exists for families that need just a little bit to take the edge off, to take the burden off, right? Because like Lynique said, you could have 2, 3 students. And so when you factor that in, and you're looking at private schools, it comes out to be a lot. And so we look at that in entirety. And so I always urge families, if you think you can afford it, call someone in the admissions office, call someone in the business office. We will talk you through it. And there are ways to afford a private school education.
Yeah, well, that's really good advice. Well, partly because like it jives with things that we're always saying, right? Which is like like do more research, look at more schools, learn what's possible, learn what's out there, and then as Andrea says, like have that conversation, open the conversation, and find out what the private school can do to meet you halfway. That just don't just dismiss it out of hand, because there may be more options than you're aware of. And if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say, hey, Kristin, did you message me? You had something to add on that?
Yeah, I was going to say something to keep in mind too, or when you're looking at private schools, a question to ask is kind of the scholarship opportunities for graduates. For example, Winston, and I can never remember the number because it shocks me every time I hear it, but our graduates receive a ton of money in scholarships for college. So it's something that you might be putting an upfront investment into a private school, but it's very likely that you'll get that return when it comes to college, to where because your child received this enriched education and that more personalized education, they'll receive more scholarships when they're going to attend college. So it might even out in the long run. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Well, and Kristin, while I have you on the big screen, another question that comes up a lot, and I alluded to this earlier, but there's families who like mine who have children with special needs. Like, we're used to having doors closed in our face, right? Mm-hmm. But there are situations where students with special needs can be served at private schools. So can you talk more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. The short answer is it depends. It depends on the private school, how they will approach the education of a student with special needs. So it's definitely something, if you have a student with special needs, something to ask when you're going on tours of private schools of what type of documentation do you require? What specific services do students receive? How will you meet their needs? So because Winston specifically our mission is supporting kids with disabilities, then all we require is just documentation and any testing that you've received at that point. Some private schools might require that you do testing through an external service or through the school district. The local school district will do testing for students, even if they are private school students, as long as they're in your neighborhood school. So it just depends, but it's definitely something to ask. We're talking to more and more private schools that are broadening their services for students with special needs because we know more about it now and more students are getting diagnosed. So we're seeing more and more private schools offering targeted dyslexia services, more accommodations for students with ADHD, understanding ADHD and autism better. So I think it's definitely one of those myths that private school is not a place for students with learning disabilities. More and more private schools are opening their services.
Yeah, and if I can sort of comment on based on my parent experience, I guess one word of advice for any parents watching this is like don't try to like hide it or think they won't notice. They'll notice, and better to find out up front, right? Because I went on some tours with my son. I homeschooled my son for first grade because none of the charter schools I wanted were open yet, and or had the right model for him. And I did visit some private schools, and there were some times where I kind of got a bad vibe. I was like they observed my son's behavior and kind of gave him side eye, and I thought, okay, you know what, I'm glad I know that now. That way we won't have a misunderstanding later. We've got the message. But I mean, I feel like times are changing, and that a lot more private schools are more open to meeting students' needs. Are more likely to have staff who have training on things like dyslexia, or Kristin mentioned ADHD, and just because of better understanding and better diagnosis. And but yeah, my advice to parents: don't hide it. Be upfront, and if you get that feeling that something's wrong, or if like a relative or a friend or a preschool teacher says, "Hey, your child should be evaluated," like do it. It's better to find out. It's better to get the early intervention, because it's not going to go away. It is who they are. But then one thing I've always tried to bring to it, even though sometimes people have told me I'm in denial, is just always believe in your child's potential. That the diagnosis is not a limitation. It's just it's a tool to help unlock the help that they need along the way, but it's still the sky's the limit for them.
Absolutely. And those the evaluations that most students go through when they're being diagnosed for a learning difference, specifically if it's a specific learning disability, those full cognitive profiles are so helpful in understanding how your student learns. So even though having a diagnosis can be scary, it's really helpful to get that information to understand where your student's processing speed is at compared to their peers, to understand where their visual processing is at compared to their peers. So that information alone is really helpful, just beyond having the diagnoses.
Yeah. Thank you, Kristin. Okay, so we've talked about some of the myths, like about affordability. We talked about the myths about special education, children with special needs. But like another, I think a myth that comes up is that the idea that all students at private school are always overwhelmed with too much homework, right? And because they're such high achieving kids. But I mean, I think what we all want for our kids is like we want them to learn and keep advancing, but we want them to also be kids and like have a home life and have interests outside of school. So Andrea, can you kind of comment on like how does Keystone support kind of that like homework life balance?
Right. So when we had our and that's kind of historically that's been the narrative of Keystone. It's there's too much homework, or there's just too much work in general. When we had the ISAS accreditation team come to our school, I think 2 years ago, what they found was that our accelerated program in terms of homework load was not any different from another comparable school that was accelerated. And that a lot of we build into the day actual time where students can get started on their work, because again, going back to this school life balance, we want them to take advantage of opportunities that exist outside of academics. We want them to be involved in sports and theater and different clubs and extracurricular activities. So for middle school, we have a study hall period built into the day. And that is when they are supposed to get started on any homework that they have, any classwork. So by the time they get home, they can dedicate most of their evening to spending time with their family, having dinner with their family, playing video games. It is middle school after all, or doing something else that really interests them. And for upper school, that's when they start getting free periods, which is 50 minutes long. They also have lunch as a free period. And as they get older, they could have 2 free periods back to back. And so, the homework and the classwork that we assign is very intentional. It's never busy work. It's never something to just have them do. So then we correct it and grade it and move on to the next thing. It reinforces what they're learning in class. But at Keystone in particular, homework is there. You can't get around it. But I think what's important about it is that we've built structures into the day where they can get a head start on it, and that it's intentional, and that the workload that our students have is no different from any other accelerated school.
Thank you. Yeah, Andrea, that's really helpful because it kind of, yeah, like it paints a different picture of what a Keystone student's life is like. Like it's not all homework. It's they go to their classes, they do exciting work. They have study halls, so they get some of their work started during the day, and then they have like all these electives, and they get to do sports and extracurricular. So it's not just an all academics life. It's like a balanced life, and it helps them get to know themselves better.
Right. And throughout this, students will learn more about themselves in terms of time management. And so a couple of years ago, we had the seniors talk to the ninth graders, and the ninth graders were talking about, is it a lot? Is the homework load a lot heavier as you progress? And the 12th grader said, well, naturally, you're starting to take more APs, so the workload is going to get heavier. But a lot of them admitted, I kind of put everything off until the last minute, and that's my fault. And so they were acknowledging that it's manageable, but also they had to find out what worked for them. They couldn't be involved in every single club and every single activity. And they also admitted, yeah, my time management could have been better. Instead of getting started on a project, I was staying late up at night, like watching TV or playing this video game. So, there's also, as students get older, they also recognize within them that, yeah, I could have managed this differently when I was younger. And I liked that transparency that the older students said to the younger students, kind of dispelling this whole myth about you're going to be bogged down with hours and hours of homework. On the one hand, you will have more work because your studies intensify, but you get a better understanding of the type of learner you are.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that because it's the, like you have to give kids a little bit of room to make mistakes, right? Because then they can learn from those mistakes, and then hopefully they're learning, things that will help them in life. And I'm thinking, yeah, there's things I've procrastinated on, or things that I haven't managed my time as well as I should have. And, I'm in my 40s, so I should know better by now, right? But but we're all human, and we all get to learn from our mistakes and have a little bit of grace. So, Lynique, I wanted to ask you also about like sort of this, balancing academics, but then also having time to develop these interests. And so, what does that look like at Fusion?
Sure. And Andrea, you hit the nail right on the head. I think I can speak for everyone here on this call. where our kids are more to us than just transcripts, right? So of course we want them to excel in the classroom, but we also care about their hopes, goals, dreams, passions, even fears maybe. And so we have to make sure that, they have time outside of school, just like any of us. So a fusion student, I think a big misconception is that since we're one-to-one, your kiddo is going to be one-to-one all day, 8 hours, and I can assure you that is not the case. Instead, what a day looks like is about 3 hours of one-on-one instruction, lunch, and then maybe 3 hours of homework cafe. And in this space, the students actually get to do the homework that they received that day in real time. There's actually a homework cafe mentor supervising, and there are other kiddos in there, so they're free to listen to music. They can work in a group. There are some students who prefer to work alone, but what we're trying to do is exactly what Andrea said, also build up those executive functioning skill sets. Sometimes I think we forget that in elementary or middle school, we never really took a class called executive functioning, right? There was no section called time management and organization. We kind of had to figure it out in real time while you're learning your other subjects. And so with Fusion, our kiddos being able to have that instruction and then go practice that mastery right away, we're hoping that they kind of build that into their life after us, whatever their post-secondary plans are. And if they've managed their day, and it does take time, especially for those middle schoolers. But as they start to grow and develop those skills, when they leave us at 3:30, their time is theirs, right? To go talk about those passions that we hope they pursue. Maybe sometimes you have to find a passion, find a hobby, but it is imperative that they have access to all of that. And so the Homework Cafe is a big piece of our programming at Fusion.
Yeah. Well, Lynique, thank you for that. Like that adds some dimension. It sounds like it's some of the same goals and some of the same challenges that the students are learning to cope with, whether they're at Keystone or at Fusion, and I'm sure at Winston as well. So there's another kind of myth that I want to address or dispel. Kristin, I'm going to send this over to you. I think parents worry about so if it's your neighborhood public school, they have to take you, they have to make room for you, right? At a charter school, they have to take your kid as long as they have room, right? They might have to run a lottery or a waiting list, but they're not selective about which students come. And then I think parents get anxiety about the idea of applying to a private school because they're worried about selective admissions. And but I remember we were talking about this earlier, and it's not like this like hurdle to clear. It's more like a matching process, right? Like finding good fit. So I was wondering if you could explain more about that. Maybe it'll help lower parents' anxiety about the idea of applying to private schools.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to think of it as when someone is applying for a job as well, because not only are you looking to see if the company is going to be a right fit for you, they're also seeing if you're going to be a right fit for the company. And so we think of kind of a similar or I think of the admissions process for private schools in a similar way. Private schools were founded because they didn't like the way that the common school movement was going. They had a different mission. And that's why private schools are mission-based. So for example, our mission is working with students who have high potential and identified learning disabilities or identified learning differences. So when we're looking at the different candidates for our program, we're looking to see if they match our mission. And it's not that the private school doesn't like your child if they're not accepted. It's that it's just not the best fit. Because we want to make sure that we're able to support the needs of the students that we accept. And if we can't support their needs, we don't want to just take your money. we want to make sure that your student finds the place where they will thrive. And unfortunately, that might not be us. But if it is us, we love to make that connection and would love to have your student. So I think when approaching the enrollment process, it's really about trying to find that right fit for both the school, but also for your child to where that they will be the most successful.
Yeah, that's great. You know what? I think this question is so important. I kind of want to open it up to the whole group. So, Andrea, can you comment about the kind of admissions? Like, what kind of questions do you get from when you're giving tours and like parents ask about like the admissions process?
Yeah, they want to know everything that it entails, and I tell them that it's lengthy because, as Kristin said, we want to make sure that it's a fit for both parties involved. I always call it pieces of a puzzle, right? And we want to make sure that the students we admit can be and feel successful. There's nothing worse than a student feeling like every day they're way in over their head. Um, that means that they don't feel safe, and our number one goal as educators is to make sure that children feel safe, that they feel like this is a place where they belong. If they feel like that, they perform better in the classroom, they are a better student, they're a better friend, they're a better person. And as educators, we're responsible for making sure that they end up in the right place. And on the flip side, if we do admit someone who is not a good fit, it it kind of, in the long run, we end up counseling them out, or they end up leaving anyway. So because it's kind of just delaying the inevitable. And so I also say it, and similar to what Kristen said, if they don't get into Keystone, it has nothing to do with them as an individual. I always say you just need more of a traditional curriculum. It's Keystone is not for everyone. It's very different. And so I've always said that just because you didn't get in here does not mean you're not going to get in at A, B, C, D, these other independent schools. Whereas they offer traditional curriculum, we do not. And then we also, once they've gone through the admissions process, and if they don't get in, we can always say, now that you know what our admissions process looks like, now that you know what our curriculum looks like, what we're looking for, you can always reapply. When we say no, at least at Keystone, when we say no to someone, we're not shutting the door and locking it, right? We're just saying it's not a fit for right now. And we've had students reapply, and they've gotten in. Sometimes it takes a year or two to be in a different kind of educational system with a different pedagogy, and then they're ready to come to Keystone. But I also want parents to realize too that when we say no, it's not the end of the road. It just means no for right now.
Thank you. And Lynique, do you want to comment on this about how this applies at Fusion?
Yes, I echo what everyone has said. I mean, as educators, we want our kids to feel successful. And the best way they could feel successful is if they actually got to go to a school and it become a home. It's really taxing when you have to go from school to school to school, right? And you have to keep starting over. So if we can find the best fit for that kiddo the first time, then that's something that we want to help with. And a big piece too is that all of us here on this call actually partnered together. And so what may not work at Keystone right now, you may come to Fusion and we get it together and get you ready for Keystone, right? So I really appreciate that the community is coming together so that we can also help solve these families' problems. So again, we want them to feel safe and at home and stay at their school, for as long as they can.
Yeah, thank you. That's and one thing I know from working with all of y'all, and from like most schools that we work with, like they really want what's best for that student, and it's not so much about being proprietary about like, oh, we need this income stream, right? The average daily attendance, or like we need the tuition from the student, but like y'all are in education because you want students to succeed. And it's really that learning process of like, and that's what we try to do is like, for me, it's exciting. It's like, oh, there's so many schools to learn about, but I know to families, it can be overwhelming. And so like, we're trying to, simplify, make better tools so that families can understand each school better and then find what's the right fit. And then, I appreciate what y'all are saying about like, maybe it's not right. It's not never, it's just not now. And that, families need to understand their kids evolve. And I know when especially for my son with special needs, like, I was probably too thin-skinned when he was younger, and sometimes I took it personally if he got turned away from something. But it's really like just every family has to have faith that there's going to be more open doors somewhere else, right? This may not be the right place. Don't get one-itis about this is the one solution. There's so much more going on in San Antonio, and I hope that folks who join like the Facebook discussion group, it's what I wish I had when I was struggling with this stuff, is that just understand how many fertile options there are out there, and you don't have to feel discouraged just because the first thing you seized on that wasn't the right path. So, okay, well, there's another myth about private schools that I want to bring up, and that is, and I've seen this with my own eyes when I visited campuses, but there's a myth that it's only a certain type of student that's going to private schools. And actually, Andrea already mentioned this. Like, really, Keystone is much more economically diverse than people realize, and also like there's many more cultures, races, and ethnicities represented at private schools than what people realize. So. Actually, so Andrea, do you want to comment on this first? But I want to give everyone a chance to weigh in, because I think this is a really important myth to dispel. Like, that I think no matter what your family background is, or your student's background, like they can feel belonging at a private school.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked in admissions for about 17 years now. Not all at Keystone, but I feel really at home at Keystone, and I use myself as an example because I've worked at various independent schools, private schools, where you can kind of feel the elitism, and at Keystone, it doesn't feel that way at all. Over 61% of our students identify as students of color. With that diversity comes diversity and socioeconomic background, cultures, customs, religions. And so that also is educational as well. It's not homogenous. If you set foot onto Keystone's campus, everyone looks different from each other. And I love that. It's preparing our students for college, who their roommate's going to be. Their roommate could be from another part of the country, another part of the world. It's preparing them for the workforce, right? So working with others who are solving a problem differently than they would, how to disagree without being disagreeable, right? To respect difference of opinion. And so I think what's really important is Lynique saying, just come onto our campus to get a feel of it, instead of saying, well, all private schools are just for rich kids and they all look the same and they all dress the same and they all act the same. It's absolutely not the case. It's different schools can provide different things, and at Keystone, it's just a breath of fresh air, seeing just optics wise, everyone looks very different from each other, and so you can feel reassured knowing that your student can see themselves reflected in the teachers and their classmates and their peers. And again, just making that opportunity to come onto campus to just really see what it looks and what it feels like.
Well, so Kristin, let me kind of ask you the same question, but like, so how do you, at Winston School, how do you build a sense of belonging for students who come from so many different backgrounds?
Oh, Kristin, you're muted.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm keeping it muted so my dogs don't chime in. So our theme this year is for belonging. And even though it's our theme this year, we chose it because it tends to be a general just feeling of how our students feel once they've come into Winston. Because all of our students have an identified learning difference, they're used to being the student in their class that's that kid. They're that kid who has to leave to go to dyslexia intervention. They are that kid who has a check-in with the counselor throughout the day. They're that kid. And they come to Winston, and it's funny because if it's their first year, they might be like, oh, well, I have ADHD. So and then you'll hear all the other kids being like, I have ADHD too. Well, I have ADHD. And sometimes the teachers, I have ADHD also, so they're really finding their kind of affinity groups there. And so we use those examples. And then along the same lines, if you were to ask me, what is a typical Winston kid? I couldn't tell you. Our kids are so different. Looking at their just academic profiles, their just the different strengths and difficulties that they have, every kid is different. So they learn that they feel a sense of belonging from the other kids who are similar to them, but they also learn that they have things in common with other people, but they also have things that are different. So we use that example to expand to all of the other different isms, right? So all of the different things that make them different and also similar beyond their differences. So whether that be their race or their family kind of dynamics or their background or the language they speak at home, just whatever makes them different, we kind of relate that to that sense of belonging that they feel when they find things that they have in common with other people, and then also celebrating the things that make them unique.
Yeah, I got a little bit emotional. You were talking about like the kids finding connections with each other. Like so I remember, so my son, to take the STAR test, he had accommodations, and one of his friends also had the same accommodations. So they were taking the test away from the other kids, but with each other. And like, this was like, I don't know, we've always been kind of like, we haven't hidden the autism diagnosis from my son, but we also didn't make a big deal out of it. And so he had this, in elementary school, he had this moment where like, he realized like I have autism, you have autism. And then like he came out of that meeting with like just so much pride of like, I'm autistic. And like, and I thought, and you know, hats off to the special ed coordinator who like fostered that attitude and that environment for them where they could, but it was like, I was like, thank goodness. Like I didn't really know how to talk to him about how his learning differences work. And because, I guess because we were kind of low key about it, but then he was able to form this identity and this bond with his friend and seeing that in common. So like, anyway, so I just, when you were talking about like the moments that these Winston school kids have with each other, like, yeah, I have HD, I have dyslexia, like, and then like it affects how they feel about themselves. And then, you know, like Andrea said, like we want to prepare them so that when they're out in the world, they can find people to connect with, they can, in the workplace, in college, like they can be flexible in this very diverse world that we live in.
It applies to the parents too. You'll see this like sense of calm once they meet other parents and I think this applies to all private schools because you choose a private school based on its mission, or, you know, there's a reason why families seek out a private school. And I think when you start to meet other people who have that same kind of, those same values, those same kind of priorities that you're meeting, it gets kind of emotional for the parents. You'll see them when they start to make those connections with other parents who have gone through the same thing or who have chosen the same route for their family.
Yeah. Okay, so Lynique, I want to give you also an opportunity to talk about. I've seen the wall of pictures up at Fusion of all the students who learn there, and it's a very diverse group, and you know, and you talked about the different student profiles. Like there's students who have like entire careers outside of their school life, even at their young age. So. But so how do y'all build a sense of belonging among the Fusion kids?
What's really unique is that I think, like Kristin just said, the kids do it themselves. I'm sure that you guys have all had this encounter where you're doing your admissions meeting and you go on your tour, and at the end of it, I'm talking to mom, and at the corner of her eye, we look at her daughter, and she's in the corner crying. And I'm like, oh gosh, was it terrible? And we're like, are you okay? And she goes, I think I found my people. And so it's like we get to have this safe space where you have all different types of learners from all different types of backgrounds who get to come together and just really build community. The funny story, at every Fusion campus, as soon as you walk in, you'll see a wall, and it has all of our pictures, my administrative team, my teachers, when we were young and awkward, to show them, hey, we were once you. And to take it a step further, we've stripped the formalities. So we are on a first name basis at Fusion. So even as the head of school, they call me Lynique, and I call them by their first names. We should have opportunities where we have to be vulnerable in order to show our students that, hey, so can you. And I just think that like with that culture and community, I mean, they're essentially doing it themselves, and it's a pretty special place.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. Okay, well, you know, Lynique, while I have you up on the big screen, I wanted to follow up on, so like you talked about like what the school day is like, and that, you know, that right, there's like the homework cafe, and they have their lunch hour, but they have the one-on-one tutoring sessions. But I'm thinking back about, like we were talking about the picture wall, but I also remember visiting and seeing like the music studio, and like right, and then there's times when kids do yoga. So can you talk more about like the extracurriculars and you know, fun stuff the kids get to do at Fusion?
Absolutely. I mean, when you walk onto a Fusion campus, you'll always see a full recording art studio. I mean, our kids can take any instrument, vocal lessons, if that is their jam. We also have the yoga studio. We know that, I mean, even as adults, it's nice to be able to practice mindfulness, so they can take yoga as an elective, or, I mean, throughout the day, if you need a minute. I once saw a math teacher and their student in the yoga studio. Like, I guess they needed a minute. Maybe algebra was hard that day. And then we also have an art studio. Our kids are beyond creative. And so it's nice to know that, hey, midday, you could have gone from AP calculus to yoga to zen out, and then, go head on over to, I don't know, biology. And another thing too is that although we are a small micro school, a big misconception is that we don't do the things that larger schools do. So we don't necessarily have sports, but we do have clubs that the students pick. When we were picking it, you guys, they said it wasn't cool anymore. We let them pick it. They took ownership, and now they're thriving. Field trips, prom, graduation. So that Fusion kiddo is still going to have a full and active social life, even in that one-to-one setting.
That's awesome. Okay, well, Kristin, let me ask you the same question about Winston School. Like, what kind of extracurriculars do the kids get to do? I know I've seen Winston kids doing sports, and sometimes playing against charter schools in sports, right?
Make sure I'm unmuted. Okay. Yeah, we have a pretty robust athletic department. We play other similarly sized kind of private and I think charter schools in the area. And then sometimes we travel a little farther. We have 6-man football. We have a volleyball team, basketball, track, cross country. And it just really depends how many students are interested in playing that sport. One of my favorite stories is a student who joined as a high schooler, and he was talking to our director of the student experience, and he was like, hey, like, it'd be really cool if we had like a fly fishing team. And he was like, all right, well, if you can find a couple other kids who'd be interested, we'll make it happen. And sure enough, he found a couple of kids and, or I'm sorry, bass fishing, not fly fishing. And they created a team. I'm not sure how that works, but they do it. They've started this bass fishing team just because one kid was interested, and he approached the director of the student experience about that. And we also have, because we are so small, one of the benefits of that is it's not tough competition really to be on the team. We get very competitive against the teams that we play. There is definitely that sense of competition in the sport, but to be on the team, we have a very inclusive mentality of if you want to learn how to play volleyball and you're in high school and you've never played before, sure, come try it out. We'll let you play. We'll see if it's something that you're interested or the same goes for any of the other sports. So where a lot of students in the large public schools would not have the opportunity to try out different sports, in a private school, they get that opportunity because it's on a smaller scale.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. It's finding your home, finding your people. So, Andrea, I know that Keystone has really robust sports programs too, and I know sometimes they do play the charter schools. I've heard stories, especially Great Hearts Monte Vista, just up the street, right?
Yeah, well, everything that Kristin said, I can pretty much just piggyback off of that. We're actually right now we're playing. I don't know which team we're playing against, but we have volleyball, varsity and JV playing tonight. I believe JV started at 5:30. But it's and it's called Dig Pink tonight. So Dig Pink, it's volleyball. And one of our junior players, her mother passed away from a certain type of breast cancer last year. And so what happened was we had a donor at the school saying that they would donate $15 per individual who showed up to the game tonight, and that money would go towards that specific type of breast cancer research. And so we have a volleyball. Our volleyball team girls volleyball is exceptionally strong for the past couple of years. I think 4 or 3 years ago, we had a student get recruited to play D1 volleyball for West Point. So when people think of Keystone, they don't really think of, oh my God, athletics. But like Kristin said, because we're so small, students have the opportunity to try a sport they've never been involved in or really hone in on their craft, right? So yeah, they go to a larger public school. There's football and there's lacrosse, but they're going up against so many students who have club experience, who've been doing this since they were 3 or 4 years old. And for someone who's athletic, but it's like, I just want to play. Like, I don't need, all the glitz and the glamour. They can absolutely do it at Keystone. What's really nice is that we had, for years, team sports began in middle school at Keystone, and middle school at Keystone begins in 5th grade, so it spans 4 years. But a couple years ago, our lower school parents went to administration and said, we really want our children to be involved in organized sports, but not have to wait until 5th grade. And so we heard that, we listened to them. And 3 years ago or 2 years ago, we formed our first 2nd through 4th grade soccer team. Last year, we started our first 3rd and 4th grade basketball team, and they're uber popular. So just really expanding the opportunities and programs to our younger students as well.
That's beautiful. Well, actually, Andrea, you created a good segue to, I think, so this will be kind of the last question that I share around with the whole group, and then we'll share kind of next steps that families can take. But like, the idea that there's advantages to going to a smaller school that's more specialized, but then there's also some trade-offs of right, because like, I mean, we all know what the big Texas comprehensive high school experiences, right? There's a lot of traditions. There's a lot of like big athletic events, and so maybe some of those things aren't necessarily happening the same way at a smaller school, but there are things that you get instead, right? That you can be an amateur, you can try everything, and you can maybe experiment with things without having to sort of pigeonhole yourself as I'm this type of student or I'm that type of student. So
Right.
I don't know. So yeah, how about Andrea? You carry that thought, and then I'll give Lynique and Kristin a chance to weigh in too.
But yeah, I mean, I've touched on sports and how if you want to be part of a team, you're part of a team, right? But in addition to that, kind of what lends itself to a small school setting is that you have access to teachers and administrators that you may not have at a larger school. So, for example, all of the new families for this school year, our head of school has reached out to them and said, let's meet up for coffee, my treat. I want to hear how the first month has gone for you. Like who who does that? Like who, and in larger schools, the principal or however many vice principals you have, like no one has that capacity, no one has that time. But in smaller schools, you absolutely have the opportunity to make these connections with the head of school, with our director of development. We want to hear from you to hear how it's going. You're not just another number. You're not just another student ID. Like Lynique said, like you're part of our family, and we want to hear how things have been going. Is there anything that we can do to make you feel more part of the community? And so when people think of small schools, I think it's easy for them to overlook the access that you have that you can't get at a larger school. You're known intimately, you're known well. Our head of school is always out front during morning carpool, morning drop off. He says hello to everyone. He makes time for everyone. And that's just not, and it's not a knock to larger public schools. It's just not feasible. But if you're looking for your child to be known, independent private schools have that kind of that advantage.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, Kristin, if you can kind of weigh in, like, so what are the things you gain by choosing, a smaller independent private school as opposed to, but you are giving up a few things that you would have had at a big comprehensive school.
Yeah, and I would just echo a lot of what Andrea said. It's a lot that intimacy, that sense of belonging is what you gain. While you might not have the huge prom with a ton of different people, we there are other opportunities there. So, and I think as private schools, we're all kind of thinking, we're all weighing that, I guess that balance, right? Of thinking about what our students are losing in a way if they're coming from a larger school. So how can we supplement that? Either provide something similar within our means, or provide something different. So for example, we don't, because our football games are small, it's, for a while, it was just parents attending the games. And so we were thinking, well, how can we create that more like Friday Night Lights feel for our football players? And so we started really building up our cheer squad. We started doing tailgates and, providing incentives for teachers to come and watch the games. And, we're always thinking about how do we balance that, and how do we make sure our kids are still getting that enriched school experience that they might be losing out on by choosing a smaller school.
Yeah, thank you, Kristin. Okay, so yeah, Lynique, can you comment on kind of what's this trade-off if a family is leaving a big education setting and going to a smaller school? I mean, some of it they may be leaving behind bullying or that they had at their old school.
Yeah, I think the beauty of going to a micro school is that we can curate the student's experience. Like, we can really transform the 23-24 school year. When you only have to hear from 100 students and 100 parents, like, we can actually specify what field trips we want. Like, what do the kids really want to get out of the school year? Where do they want to go? Parents, who would you like to hear from in the community? Versus in a large traditional setting, it's hard to hear from 3,000 parents. And so I think that, again, just the beauty in it being small is that we really know your kids. The other day I was walking into the building. We were still in the parking lot, and mom's like, "Hey, Lynique, you got a second?" And I'm like, "Sure thing. No computer or anything, but like anything for you." And we get to do that. I feel lucky that our parents know us well enough that they can do that. So if you're looking for like family, small is where it is.
Yeah, well, great. Well, I've really enjoyed asking these questions of all of y'all. And I look forward to doing this again on November 2nd. But before we close out today, I want to make sure that families who are curious about your particular schools, that they know where they can go to get more information, how they can get in touch with you. So Lynique, how about you lead us off?
Yeah, please visit P Fusion Academy San Antonio website. You'll be able to enter your contact information. And from there, we can even get you set up with a free session just to get started.
That's amazing. Okay, so and then Kristin, can you comment about Winston School?
Yeah, so you can check out Winston's website. It's winston-sa.org. We have an open house on October 17th where you can meet our director of admissions. And then we also are really active on Facebook and Instagram. We host a lot of public events it's free to the public. They're learning series where if you have a student with learning differences, you can come learn more about their experience through school and how to support them. So I would also check out our social media pages to see about those free events.
I'm getting there we go. Okay, so anyway, I got the Facebook one up real quick. So it's WSSA Eagles, but if you just search Winston School San Antonio, that will get you to the right page, because there's other schools with similar names, but Winston School San Antonio.
Yeah, we are San Antonio.
Yeah, that'll get you the right one. Okay, great. Okay, so Andrea, what advice do you have for folks wanting to learn more about Keystone School?
Oh, just get in contact. KeystoneSchool.org. My information will be on the website. Call, email, visit, do all the things. We have an event called Visit Keystone for kindergarten through fourth grade prospective applicants on October 18th. It is a wonderful opportunity to tour campus, meet administrators, see classes in action. It's like a very mini open house, but it's during the school day. And then if you have a student who's in middle school or upper school, we have a Visit Keystone event for those divisions on November 8th. But if you go to our website at KeystoneSchool.org, it's all there on the homepage, and you can register for those events there.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, this is there's so many moments I kept getting emotional, right? But it's, you know, it's we all want the best for our kids, and you guys are you and your teams are creating these really unique learning environments, and I hope that this has opened some minds, opened some eyes that parents who maybe weren't considering private school, but now that we've dispelled some of these myths about like how, you know, selectiveness or affordability, you know, special needs, that families can take a closer look. And I really encourage families to, like, if you're curious about a private school, go and visit, learn more about it, figure out if it's a great fit for your kids, you know, kind of interview each other, right? And then and ask those questions about financial aid and things like that. Okay, well, thanks y'all so much. Thank you for joining me this evening, and I look forward to talking to you again soon on the November 2nd event.
Thank you, Inga.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Night.